Sir, thank you very much and welcome to The Point. Once again, at this critical juncture in the city of San Francisco, where the Chinese presidential entourage has just passed through the streets of San Francisco, it's a very special moment. I'm seeing a lot of excitement. How are you feeling about it?
Well, first, it's great to see you in person, having been doing these interviews on Zoom, now to do it in person. But it's terrific that this has occurred. It's been really many months that we have hoped that this was occurred. When you look at my interviews and speeches early in 2023, it was the hope that Xi Jinping and President Biden would meet. And now that hope has become a reality, that what we've seen since April 10th of this year, when Wang Yi met with National Security Advisor Blinken in Austria, is a gradual improvement.
Jake Sullivan.
Jake Sullivan, yes, met with Wang Yi. We've seen a very gradual improvement in U.S. China relations. We've seen visits of many cabinet-level people. We've seen Han Zheng, Wang Yi come to the United States. We've seen a bunch of discussions. Now what we hope is we begin to see some concrete, substantive outcomes. And my hope is when the presidents get together, they can push down on their bureaucracies to have substantive outcomes. So maybe we'll see just some minor things Wednesday after they've met. But my hope is they will lay a foundation for more progress as we go into 2024.
Give us an idea what kind of minor things you're referring to. Minor doesn't seem to fit into the expectations of a lot of people who have been anticipating this.
The expectations are actually very subdued.
Here in the United States.
In the United States. We're not going to see a strategic shift in U.S. China relations.
Why not?
Because what we will see, though, is we'll see improvement in visa issuance. We'll see improvement in people-to-people exchange. We'll see increase in the number of flights. Very, very, very important. I will be going nonstop from San Francisco to Beijing in 2 weeks, which is great that United has started that along with many other U.S. and Chinese carriers, because that's important, as President Xi points out. The foundation of U.S. China relations is in the people-to-people exchanges. And if we don't have them, we're never going to get the improvement that you were asking me. Why is it not having? I hope we'll see progress with respect to restrictions on fentanyl, the precursors to fentanyl, which often go from China to Mexico to the United States. I have a great hope that we can see that, because too many Americans die as a result of fentanyl overdoses. So that would be China literally saving the lives of Americans. And isn't that great? So we can kind of say to the people of the United States, improved U.S. China relations is saving American lives. So I hope we see progress on that. I hope we see some progress on climate change. I hope we see some progress on pandemic protection. So there are a lot of areas where the cooperation exceeds the conflict.
I get it that you're seeing it from these different perspectives. This is very interesting because this is seen differently in China. For China, it is not about straightening the ties. It's about getting the understanding of what the fundamentals should be and the approach to this relationship. What China is asking for is understand how to deal with this relationship, and then we can smoothen out the other one. China has the metaphor, get the first button right, and then the rest of the buttons will follow. But what you're seem to suggesting is that let's start with the practical, things that doesn't touch the foundations, and then maybe sort out the fundamentals when and if we can.
The two presidents are going to be able to talk about their visions for U.S.-China relations. So to the extent that each of them are clear on where the other stands, that's a big improvement. That sometimes the communications have been through the media, which is not healthy. It's much healthier to have the President of the United States and the President of China sit together for hours and talk about what the relationship is and what it should be.
Well, they sat down and talked a year ago, almost exactly the same time
in Bali,
in Bali and Indonesia. And according to our understanding, they had the kind of consensus that, look, the United States is not seeking a Cold War. The United States does not seek to change China's political system. The United States does not support Taiwan independence. The United States does not, it has these consensus, and yet over the past 1 year, what the Chinese side is seeing is that these consensus were not implemented through the bureaucratic system and translate into concrete changes on the ground.
There were a number of unforeseen incidents that occurred between Bali and now. And I think those are history. So the important part is to look forward. And I think a lot of what was agreed to in Bali will be agreed to again and will be implemented. And I think some of the things which were discussed were implemented. But things went off the road. It was a difficult time. But on April 10th and April 11th in Vienna, Austria, the two governments, through Wang Yi and through Jake Sullivan, made a decision. Let's set this straight, because it is dangerous and unhelpful to the United States, China, and the rest of the world when the senior leadership of China and the United States don't speak. So they are going to speak. They're not going to agree on everything, but to the extent that they can agree enough and improve the relationship somewhat, that is very important. Look, why can it not fix strategically? Look at the poll that came out just when you landed in the United States by the Chicago Council on Foreign Affairs. The polling that they did showed that 60% of Americans believe that China is the greatest national security threat to the United States. It's very difficult, if the people believe that much, for the leadership to kind of change policy and suddenly say, oh, China's our partner. So it's important that you take little steps to rebuild trust, rebuild the belief in the people of China and the people of the United States that there are benefits from U.S. China relationship, that peace and economic prosperity and stability for the next generation are byproducts of good U.S. China relations, and both presidents need to talk about that.
Could you point to some of the concrete benefits that a good relationship have brought and can still bring to America? You know this by heart.
The most important is peace. I'm old enough to remember when we had war in Asia, and China had war for decades and decades before the establishment of diplomatic relations. Hundreds of thousands of Americans and millions of Chinese died in those years. Guess what? Since we established diplomatic relations, we've had a peaceful Asia. Those are related. Economic prosperity, when the United States and China cooperate, it leads to better lives for both Chinese and American. It leads to Americans. It leads to better innovation. It leads to, a life that is more full, that to the extent Chinese come to the United States, the people-to-people exchanges create environments where both Americans and Chinese live better. They just, the hundreds of thousands of Chinese students before 1979, there were no Chinese students in the United States. Think what they have contributed to America. And they have contributed inventions, they've contributed companies, they've contributed innovation, they contributed to Americans understanding more of China. Now what we need is more Americans to be going to China. And hopefully the two presidents will talk about that. Ways to get Americans back to China.